attempts to match it to one of our stored mental models. And if it doesn't match, then the brain has to create a new model for it. And this is a system that's developed over millions of years of evolution that makes getting through the world easier than it would be if we had to stop and examine everything every time. So for example, you can look at a Dalmatian and a Great Dane and a Chihuahua and you'll know they're all dogs. You don't have to look at them twice to tell that they're dogs. If you did have to stop and examine everything every time, you would never get anything done and you'd go extinct and you wouldn't be here, right? So these mental models are very important for the way we function in the world, and they're also a way of tricking us because they're malleable and they can be changed. And essentially what Enron did was, and so in addition to mental models, we have other automated things that we do, like a routine for tying our shoes. Things become automated very easily. And what Enron was doing was they were producing what became a normal behavior that for them was a sort of mental model of what we do and how we do it, and gradually expanded it to hold more and more diversions from the normal course of doing business. So things that at first were just fudging a little gradually got more and more out of whack with what was normal, and were being accepted as the mental model or the behavioral script that was appropriate,
and also the group,
until they finally went completely outside the bounds of legality.
And also there was a groupness. We're going to talk back to the groupness of that. You know, wasn't there a hierarchy in the group?
Yes.
You know, like you said in the monkeys. Oh, monkeys, sorry. Apes. I don't know why I call everybody.
There's an easy way to tell monkeys from apes.
Okay.
Monkeys have tails. Apes do not.
Oh.
Do you have a tail?
Sometimes I think I do.
People are a form of ape. Humans are a species of ape.
Okay.
So you can always remember that if it has a tail, it's a monkey. If it doesn't, it's an ape.
Right. And in the ape society, and you know you study the bonobos, was that there was a hierarchy. And that there was an ape that was brought in. What was his name again?
Viaje.
He was brought in from Mexico. He had a Mexican owner that kept him, and he somehow, when he got to the group, and these bonobo apes are in Milwaukee Zoo. If anybody or any of our audience would like to see them, they're in the Milwaukee Zoo. And what had happened, he didn't fit in because he wasn't in the society.
The group
rejected him.
He was the new guy.
He was the new guy on the block. And in going back to the Enron type of thing, what the head of the group was maybe the head ape. We could call him the head ape. And
he was reinforcing this model of behavior, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And when people outside the group told them, you know, naughty, naughty, you shouldn't do this, they were like, oh, they don't know anything about it because they're not part of the in-group. So they reject information from outside the group to their detriment, and that's often the case.
So they didn't want to go against what is the head of the apes called? What is in the hierarchy?
Well,
do they have a name for them?
In bonobo society, it's a matriarchal society, so the chief woman in the bonobo society is, well, she just died recently, but it would be a woman, you know, a female in that case.
So in the Enron society, there was a chief also. I think it was a chief male in that society, and nobody wanted to go against him.
Right.
So there's a lot of the sameness between our species.
If you study bonobos, as I have tried to do, you can't help but see how much like them we are. If you just go to the Milwaukee Zoo and sit there and watch them for a few months, you will get on the subway and you'll go, oh my gosh, here we are. Or read the newspaper, you know, watch the TV news, and you'll see we're not far from that.
You know, there was an experiment that you wrote about in your book, which was very interesting. It was done by Philip Zimbardo. He was in the psychology department at Stanford, and he did a research project. And what he did was he built a prison cell in the basement of the psych building on the campus, and he had male students that were participating in this project. Half of the group were the guards, and half of the group were the prisoners. And it's very interesting. I want you to tell, because Abu Ghraib prison, there was a lot of similarities that what happened in this particular experiment. I want you to talk about it, what you did talk about in your book, which I thought was extremely, I mean, I really understood what happened at Abu Ghraib after your research.
Well, this is a very famous experiment called the Stanford Prison Experiment, and as you say, he built a prison in the basement of the psych building there, and designated half the volunteers. By the way, first he vetted these students. He had these students evaluated to make sure that they were psychologically normal. They were kind of the cream of the crop, these Palo Alto college students.
So there was nothing mentally wrong with them.
He didn't go like on Skid Row and pick up bums to do this. These were upper middle class, nice kids. And he designated half of them as guards, gave them uniforms, and designated half as prisoners and gave them prison fatigues. And they went into the cells. And within 6 days, I believe it was, they had to shut the program down because the guards had become so abusive and the prisoners had become so psychologically disturbed that they just couldn't let it go on. It was too dangerous. And the guards were doing things like sexually degrading the prisoners and putting them in stress positions, and it's well worth reading. But when the Abu Ghraib prison scandal broke, Zimbardo wrote a piece, I believe it was for the New York Times, basically saying, this is what happened in my experiment. These guards at Abu Ghraib are not bad apples. This is just the way people are if you put them in the right situation. And in fact, you know, my kids were perfectly good kids too, and they did this to their fellow man. And so this concept people have that somehow Abu Ghraib represented an aberration is wrong. Anybody can do that when put in the right set of circumstances, and the people who were actually to blame in the Abu Ghraib scandal are the much higher up commanders who set this thing up in the first place.
But what happened to these, when they did set this up, and these were, you said, normal Stanford students, why did they become this way? What happened that the guards became so abusive? How did, you know, and they were such nice kids, by just putting on a uniform and telling them that they're a guard? How does that happen?
Well, because we are a species of ape, if you look at our closest relatives, who are the chimpanzees and the bonobos, you will see what kind of behavior is inherent in us. And it doesn't take much in the way of change in surrounding to bring it out. If you read something like Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and you look at Kurtz in Heart of Darkness, you see the point that Conrad is making is that if you put an ordinary person, even a smart and capable and well-meaning person, in the right circumstances, he can very easily slip over that border into barbarity.
That's interesting.
It's part of our nature to be barbaric.
Yeah, because the Mexican bonobo, Viaje, is that how you pronounce it? Viaje.
It means journey.
He was a very sweet, you know, because he was raised by a human, but as soon as he got into the environment of the other ones, they would not accept him.
Right, that's right. Viaje.
So that he became, they became very, like they did with the guards. They abused him. They became abusive.
Yes.
Here's a nice species. They're very good. It almost like they somehow somebody put the guard uniform on these others, the other ones, and they came after because he was not accepted. I see him as he was the more or less they were the guards and he was the prisoner. So so when you're talking about if you're going to do something that's similar or something that's exactly what went on in Stanford, I see the same thing happening in the cell, in his environment.
Exactly. Zimbardo was just modeling that behavior in an experimental setting. But that's what goes on. That's what goes on in the wild.
So yeah, there's a lot of similarities, you know, between the two, and I was kind of surprised at something like that. And here's what happened in Abu Ghraib. I mean, the same thing. We had our military most of them come from a nice home, and as soon as they had their guard uniforms, they became also in some way abusive as well. So I mean, as you put a uniform on somebody, their animal behavior comes out.
That's correct. It doesn't take much. There's a large body of psychological work that's been done since Zimbardo that shows basically that your behavior depends a lot more on the circumstances at the moment than it does on something inherent in you. So even a person who is normally good and law-abiding and has good intentions can go beyond the pale depending on the circumstances. And you see this in every war that happens. People who would never